Sure. We're going to move on to our final panel this afternoon. It is titled 21st Century Baseball Research, Much More Than Box Scores. Our first panelist is Allison Levin, who is an associate professor of sports communication at Webster University in St. Louis, Missouri. She is also on the board of directors for SABR and serves in an advisory role for the 9 Spring Training Conference. We are also joined by Roberta Newman. Roberta is a clinical professor of liberal studies at New York University, and she is currently in the early stages of a project investigating East Asian baseball and advertising. Her most recent book, Here's the Pitch, The Amazing, True, New, and Improved Story of Baseball and Advertising, was the recipient of the 2020 SABR Baseball Research Award. And we are also happy to welcome Laura Furman, the Chief Curator of Collections and Education at the Midway Village Museum in Rockford, Illinois. And moderating this panel is Professor of History and Women's Studies and the Chair of the History and International Studies Department at Rockford University, Catherine Forslund, who I will turn it over to now.
Thank you very much, Jessica, for the introductions. I'll just remind everybody what we've been doing is trying to keep the cameras off except for the people presenting so that the bandwidth is as good as possible. So thanks to everybody for doing that. I don't have a lot to say to introduce our group, except I wanted to ask each of them to speak a little bit about their area of research. I titled our panel, More Than the Box Scores, because in looking at the work of Allison and Roberta, I was so impressed with how interdisciplinary it is as a fellow academic. We're all, well, at least some of us are always trying to break down those walls between disciplines and help our students see that, yeah, it is all kind of connected somehow, right? And I've worked with Laura for, I don't know how many years, Laura, at least 20, right? I'm thinking.
Probably.
Yeah, at least 20, probably for as long as I've been in Rockford, which is going on to 23 years now. So I've worked with Laura at Midway. I am a member of the artifacts committee there that she chairs. And so we work a lot together, and I thought of her because of the great connection that Midway has to the Peaches, and they have a collection of material there. There's an exhibit that's a permanent exhibit about the Peaches at Midway Village. So if you're in the Rockford area or passing through, haven't seen it, definitely worth a stop. But we're also working to try and make that stuff accessible to people who can't come to Rockford. And so that's one of the things I also wanted Laura to contribute to the conversation. So I don't really I'm not going to call on anybody to start. So I'll kind of let you guys volunteer. I see Laura has her microphone off, so maybe she wants to go first. I don't know, but.
Doesn't matter. I was just afraid I was going to get called on and be muted still.
Yeah, that's always my problem too. So why don't you kick us off with what can Midway tell researchers about the Peaches?
Okay. And if you'll bear with me, I saw that somebody had made me co-host. I do have some slides to put up just so you're getting some visuals of what I'm talking about. Hopefully it's all going to behave itself.
Fingers crossed.
Yes. That's not what I meant to do. That's what I wanted to do. Okay. Murphy's Law. As soon as I say I've got it, okay. All right. Let me know if we're making progress. I think I see signs of progress.
Yep. It looks like it's loading. There we go.
All right. Well, I thought we'd do better with some visuals, and those are a little more inspiring and make sure everybody knew what I was talking about. It's fun to be here today. As Catherine said, I'm at Midway Village Museum as the curator. We are Rockford's history museum, and so we've been collecting artifacts that illustrate Rockford's history since 1974. And of course, one of those major stories that we have often focused on telling has been that of the Rockford Peaches as part of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. We have a total collection of about 170,000 items in our care, everything from toys, tools, furnishings, clothing, and all kinds of other stuff. If you can think of it, we have it. But a lot of what we have is archival materials, and at least 500 of those items are related to the Rockford Peaches in one way or another. We do have a small collection of three-dimensional artifacts related to the Peaches as well. But most of what was donated to us has come since the release of A League of Their Own. It really wasn't until the 90s when the public kind of woke up again and remembered the story and remembered the impact and said, oh, wait, I wonder if the museum would be interested in these things. However, what I would say is that interest has long since outpaced the movie. There's never a year that goes by that I don't have people calling who want to offer us artifacts, photographs, documents, and souvenir items. Everything from pennants like the one below to autographed baseballs, all kinds of things. The interesting thing with the baseballs that are autographed is some of them are from the 1940s and 50s. Others are from the 1990s when the players were doing community appearances and getting a lot of attention, and having a lot of folks come out and want to relive their childhood memories of being at the games and get these women's signatures as well. We have a small collection of things that have been donated to us by players, primarily some things from Helen Wyatt, who was part of the Peaches 1950 to 51. She still has been in the Rockford area and has been involved with the museum from time to time. Said after she retired in 51 and got married and left the league that she could never go back to watching the games again because she just couldn't stand to watch it after having been part of it. But great athlete. She's given us a couple of things for our archives, including some contract paperwork of signing on with the league, as well as a pay stub or two, which is fun to kind of look at from the standpoint of, all right, what were the pay discrepancies? How did that change over time? How has all of that evolved over decades? And how did that get its start with this league? Bobby Thompson is another one who has been involved with the museum during her lifetime. She passed away, I think last year, but played for the Peaches in 1950. I'm sorry, 40. Let's rewind that. I did not write down what year she played. Anyway, played with the Peaches. So did Joan Kaufman. Both of them have donated to the museum their cleats, and we also have some of Bobby's other gear, including her glove and some of her memorabilia. A lot of what we have, however, has come from the community. I did sneak in a picture there of the trophies that we have as well. That's kind of the last bit of our three-dimensional items that I wanted to share this morning. But a lot of what we have has come back to us from the community, from people who followed the games, who turned out to watch it all, who served as Batgirls, who were part of the fan association, all of those sorts of things. And there's some really fun stuff that is embedded in that collection. This is one of my favorite scrapbooks, assembled by Joy Valentine, who was a Peaches fan and we believe a Batgirl for at least practices during the 1949 to 50 year. But she painstakingly, as a little girl, cut out all of these photos of her favorite players. She got photographs and snapshots and autographs, including things like the ad for Dorothy Kamenchek Night at Bayer Stadium when she was being sent off after 9 years with the league. She has schedules that she's painstakingly kept. However, On a lighter note for our day, I do think my favorite part of the scrapbook is what she's written on the cover, presumably to her brother or sister, is "Don't snoop around in this book anymore or beware, danger." um, so, kids will be kids, but clearly something that was important to her as a kid, and collecting all the things about the women that she looked up to. We have a large collection of programs, and as you might imagine, we can have multiple copies of the same one and sometimes have very different information depending on whether or not the person who had the program was writing down the blow-by-blow of the game on their scorecard. So there are some instances where you can take a look at what everyone's stats for the game were. Also plenty of opportunities to see things like what the schedule was, how densely packed the season generally was, as well as getting a look at the more local end of things, who was stepping up locally to support this league. Then as now, plenty of advertising sponsors and business supporters who were bringing in revenue at points. Lots of fun stuff to look at. We have a lot of photographs, some more informal, like the ones on the edges here, more in their practice clothes and hanging out clothes, and then the center photo all gussied up for the camera and looking very more formal. But we still have a lot of photos that were taken by local families. A lot of people come into the museum and say, there was a Peaches player that was staying with a family who lived across the street from me or down the block, and we used to talk to her all the time, and we used to go to the games and watch her play. Those sort of stories have been kind of a point of pride that people really enjoy being able to bring to us. We have a lot less in our archives that has to do with kind of the team management, and a lot more to do with the community impact and the individual experiences of these women. There was a fan association, fan club, and they sold membership units for a while to help raise the initial money to get the team to Rockford, and then going forward to continue supporting the team. There was a year, you'll see that the sticker that we all had to put on our cars in Rockford for years and years to help fund street improvements. In 1950, they put the Rockford Peaches on the sticker, and Helen Wyatt has gifted us with hers that is unused, which is fabulous. Lots of fun things. There's a few of the advertising details, stockholders, and some of the advertisers who were getting on board quick to put their money behind the Peaches: Coca-Cola, Smith Oils, Rockford Dye and Tool Works, all kinds of local connections. Some of my favorite things, though, are some of the souvenirs and promotional items. On the left is a necktie that has the Boost the Peaches logo on the bottom of it, that belonged to a local gentleman who bought it as part of a fundraiser and wore it when he went to games. Maybe even more fun than that, though, is the jacket on the right, which belonged to a young girl who had this little jacket autographed by players and then went back and embroidered over all of the signatures. And these things are in our Peaches exhibit, which, as Catherine said, is a permanent exhibit. We put our first Peaches exhibit up in probably the late 80s, early 90s, and have had near constant clamoring from the public to always have it there. So that's one of our longest standing permanent exhibits, and one that we will continue going forward.
I posted in the chat a link to the electronic stuff about the Peaches that you all have in the digital collection. So
yeah, and I'll touch on that as well, and put it up on the screen. Thank you for putting that out there. I think the original PowerPoint that I sent out to you guys as we were planning included a colorized film of the Rockford Peaches playing the Chicago Colleens in the early 50s. And when I tried to open everything and test out my tech yesterday, it was refusing to open it as part of the PowerPoint. So I thought I'd share a few minutes of that when I'm done with the other things I have, because it's a fun piece. It was donated to us by Dottie Ferguson Key, who played with the Peaches from 45 until 54. Had been a speed skating champion and made fabulous throws from the outfield. She played for the Peaches. And we've been fortunate to be able to digitize that film with some grant funding in the last couple of years to make sure that we have a stable copy of it that is preserved and more easily shared than it would be in its original format. We do have a smattering of other baseball related collections that are interesting in their own rights, even if they're not women's baseball. Rockford was home of the Forest City Nine, the Forest City Baseball Club, in 1863. Albert Spalding was part of that team starting in 1866. They were playing mainly regional baseball until they got hooked into what became the start of Major League Baseball. But we have this 1871 baseball card in our possession, which is just a marvel. Also some things to do with Harry Wright and his involvement with the Forest City Nine, and Hal Carlson, who was born in Rockford. He's the one at the top there. Was a pitcher in the major leagues from 1917 to 1930, and his family returned some of his memorabilia to Rockford after his death. Of course, we are not the only museum with collections related to the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. Museums and historical societies in most of the cities that hosted teams over the years have their own holdings. In fact, my first job in museums and archives was working at the Grand Rapids Public Library in Michigan, working on a huge collection of photographs, which included photos from the Grand Rapids Herald newspaper, and there were hundreds of photos of the Grand Rapids Chicks in that collection, playing games at home. But also that was the first time that I ever understood that there were some years of spring training in Cuba, and there were photos that had been in the newspaper from that as well. Many of you probably know that the History Museum in South Bend, Indiana, is the national repository for the league's Players Association. So many of the league's photographs and documents, film footage, scrapbooks, things like that are at the museum in South Bend. And of course, Cooperstown Hall of Fame has their own collection as well. As Catherine mentioned, we've in the past 10 years worked to start trying to get our photos related to the Peaches more accessible. So if you were to go to our website, you would be able to see more than 100 images of Rockford Peaches related photos on our online collection. If you go to midwayvillage.com, you'll then go under collections to a tab that says online collections, and then hit the maroon button there that's in the middle of the screen to view our digital collections website. And the Peaches are in their own little collection grouping so that you can either look at them on their own or word search your way through. We've had a great time using that as a means of getting our collection out there and more available to everybody, from fourth graders who may be doing history fair projects on the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League to we had a genealogy request last week from someone who was related to a Rockford Peach and had never seen pictures of that great aunt playing ball, and was just thrilled beyond belief that we were able to connect her up with some of those things. So we're always willing to work long distance with folks and have done it frequently. So if there's something that you're working on from the other side of the country and you're investigating something to do with the league, something to do with one of the players, please do reach out to us, and we're happy to try and make that happen, and try and connect with you. And the online collections just make it that much easier. Over time, we'd like to add more of our archival documents to the collection as well. But right now it's mainly just the photographs. If we're okay on time, I will pull up the film just to show us a couple minutes of it. It's fun footage, and I'd love to share it for just a second.
I think we have time for that. I would like to see it. I think a lot of people would too. So
Yeah.
we'll take it.
Okay, that was my intent. Okay, I think it was that one. Yeah, sure. A little bit of a long leap. Jump forward. No audio, but great video.
Awesome. Is it showing on your end, Laura?
Yes, are you not seeing it?
Yeah, we're just seeing black.
Well, that's not good.
No, and I don't know if it's because
Did you click to optimize when you share your screen for video?
No.
Okay, that might be why.
How do I do that?
You have to go back out of it, and before you share your screen, at the bottom, it has two little links that you can click on. One says share sound and the other says share to optimize video.
Okay. Sorry, I
help.
missed that
Nope.
step yesterday. I thought I was doing
Oh,
so
yeah,
well,
that's-
going through all the tech prep.
Yeah, it's in the share screen. Thanks, Leslie. I didn't know about that.
Okay, I'm not sure I did any better because I'm not sure I saw it. So, are you seeing it now?
No.
Okay, why don't we do this? I will minimally see if there's a way for me to figure it out after our other speakers have done their stint, and we can linger afterwards if people would like to. Otherwise, I will Dropbox a link to the committee to share afterwards if we're unable to get it righted. So.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Sorry. Yep.
No, appreciate you trying. So Allison and Roberta, who wants to talk about their work and how research is a part of it, how you do it, what you find, whatever you'd like to share with us about that process.
I can because my research really kind of dovetails with the type of material that Laura was speaking about. So if you'd like, my work is primarily deals with advertising, promotion, and visual imagery, a whole lot of visual imagery, promotional items as relates to a number of different types of baseball. I am interested in the business communities that supported teams in small towns, in big cities. So I did a whole bunch of work on the Negro Leagues, and as well as a larger project on the kind of a history of baseball and its relationship to advertising, because I'm fascinated by the fact that as industries, they emerged at the same time in the same place, and to see how they've been connected throughout and how they continue to be. It drives me crazy when people say, well, baseball is a children's game. No, it's not. It's always been a business enterprise from the very get-go. I think it went the other way, from a business enterprise to children playing it, but at least here it did. Anyway, The way I tend to do research is kind of old-fashioned, although the digitization of archives has been tremendously useful. I like to search old newspapers. I find much of my material from searching old newspapers. The ProQuest historical Black newspapers, I would not have been able to do any of my work without that. Now that it's at one point when I first started, I was one of those people that burrowed into the basement of our university library and looked at microfilm for hours on end. I cannot tell you how many issues of the Chicago Defender I've read through. And what I'm looking for is not the news, not the scores, but who advertises on the sports pages, who advertises in the programs, who, what cross promotions there are with a variety of teams and local businesses. Local is pretty much my favorite thing to do, and the smaller the town, the better. It's a lot more interesting. The other thing that I find tremendously useful is gossip pages, especially if I'm doing stuff on business or on owners. So looking at who are these owners, who are the coaches, who are the players in the community? Do they show up in the gossip columns? What are they up to? Because they're very often business leaders, you'll find. And they are very open about their connection to the sport, to the team. I'm a big fan of business papers. I cannot tell you how many, and I'm thinking about this connection between what we're talking about now and the book club later, because one of the greatest wealth of information I have ever found is the Effa Manley papers. Jim Overmeyer did a fantastic job of organizing them. They belong to the Newark Public Library and they're readily available and they're now digitized. Once again, no more microfilm or old crumbling papers. And they are fascinating. And here we have a woman in baseball, a woman very much in charge of an important business operation. So I think that this is extremely a wonderful source. Looking at, for me, what did Manley's team, the Newark Eagles, what did she spend? And when I say she, I mean she, we know that Effa Manley. What did she spend on promotion? Who did she make business deals with? Everyone took her seriously in Newark, I'll tell you that. Who were her sponsors, and did she have relationships outside of her own community? I will tell you, yes. Most of the sponsorship deals that Manley had, that she did a lot of work with, were local white business owners, because there was a lot of interest in baseball in general in Newark. And there was a lot of interest in supporting her team because they drew well. And all that is there in her business papers. Now, I didn't spend a lot of time looking at contracts, but there are a whole pile of contracts, as well as correspondence about the players she sold to, and I hate using that term, but she did. And she was very big on being compensated. So the players she sold to the major leagues, because the Eagles were a major source of some very great major league players. Larry Doby, Monty Irvin came from Mrs. Manley. So those business papers are tremendously, tremendously interesting and useful. Looking at something like how much did they spend for lunch? How much road trips cost? These things are really, really valuable when you do this sort of research. Another great source I found, also for Black baseball, but here's another women in baseball connection, are the T.Y. Baird players from the Kansas City Monarchs. T.Y. Baird was the second owner of the Kansas City Monarchs, and his papers are at University of Kansas in Lawrence. And he's got there's a lot of stuff in those papers that deal with his advertising and promotion. And, you know, it wasn't my interest at the time. I didn't look for it, but I believe he's got there are transactional papers from when Tony Stone was acquired from the Clowns and went on to the Monarchs. There are transitional papers. I've never been able to see the Indianapolis Clowns papers. I know they exist and I know they're in Peekskill, but I haven't been able to see them. I don't know if Leslie Heafy's been able to see them, but these are really, really, really great sources. So not all of us can travel to Lawrence, Kansas. Not all of us can travel, not all of us can access this, but so much archival information is digitized. Unfortunately, it costs a lot of money to access ProQuest historical newspapers, but some of the other newspapers are far less expensive. Paper of record isn't just the sporting news. They have a lot of local papers, as well as newspapers.com that are available through SABR. All you have to do is click on the research link, and I found myself in there a lot. My university library, I've been reading a lot of the Nippon Times lately to look at, I'm looking at Japanese baseball right now and to see what's on the sports pages. What does the English language newspaper have to say about what was going on? A lot of other newspapers are available at a small cost from, newspaperarchive.com. The thing that bothers me about newspapers.com and Newspaper Archive is that their search tools are so inelegant that you really can't find a lot of what you're looking for. So I think it would be really interesting to look at what's available in the Peaches Archive and in some of the other archives and collections connected with the All-American Girls, because there may be a story to tell about advertising in the local communities. It goes beyond fandom, but to look at who was supporting these teams and why. What kind of companies wanted their names associated with this type of baseball? That to me would be extremely interesting. Now, I will admit, I haven't done a lot of work on women's baseball. This is a thing about being a researcher too, being a woman who researches baseball but doesn't research women's baseball necessarily, is that we all tend to, I don't know, Alice, if Allison's had the same issues, being ghettoized. Oh, you are a woman, you study baseball, therefore you must know everything about women's baseball. I love women's baseball. It's really important to me, and I am deeply committed to seeing women play. But Oh, absolutely. I just saw in the chat, I shouldn't know anything about men's baseball. The thing I discover, and Allison too, I think, is the minute we open our mouths and say we study this, we get people firing trivia at us to prove that they know more than we do. And you know, I can't answer a lot of trivia questions. You want to know how much the Monarchs spent on advertising in, I don't know, 1952. I could probably go back through my papers and find that and tell you. But, and who they sent their printing to and what their bill was for programs, but I can't tell you who hit what. But it is a bit of an issue, I think. I mean, this is probably a side issue, but since we're talking about research, that women who research baseball are women in baseball, I think. And that we come up against, I wouldn't say as strongly, but we often come up against the same or similar issues to a much lesser extent than our colleagues who are working directly with the game. So this is primarily what I do, as I said. I actually recently did some work on manga, and I presented it this year at 9, and a number of you I know were there. But it's fascinating that a lot of manga, Japanese comic books, feature baseball. Manga is a major subcategory in manga, and a lot of the comics feature girls playing, girls managing boys' high school teams, girls playing, girls teams. There are women manga writers who've done baseball. It really reflects the robust culture there. But that's about all I have to say. Although I could go on.
Thank you very much, Roberta. I think the business side of baseball and the business side of women's baseball, I think would be a really interesting kind of comparison. But from just the things I've seen that Midway has and that Laura has showed, the local connection to advertising with those women's teams, I think is probably something that would not be hard to track. I mean, it might not be equally evident in every city that those teams played in, but in cities like Rockford and others that people know where they have some kind of a local history archive for their team, I suspect that would not be a hard thing to find in the programs, in the some of the memorabilia that boosts the Rockford Peaches logo that Laura showed. I mean, I've seen that on a number of things. So I think that's a really exciting way to look at the bigger impact of those women's teams beyond. I mean, it's great that all the things, the inspiration for girls and all that stuff, I'm not diminishing any of that, but to look at it from this very different kind of perspective, I think is something that really adds to the canon of women in baseball. So thank you for that work.
Oh, thank you. I'm actually pretty excited by the idea of looking into this because it really would expand my work and it gives me a way to look at women's baseball, which I've been looking for.
So I'm hoping instead of a Black Baseball, Black Business title, you'll have a women's baseball, women's business, or women's baseball, everybody's business, or something, which you can see I got from Interlibrary Loan. So
Oh, I would love to.
that would be awesome.
Awesome. If there were enough in there for a book, I would be so happy. I would love to work on that.
Well, I bet there is. It's just as it always is the case with research, it's just a matter of finding it, right?
Right. And I wouldn't have to learn Japanese to do it, which seems to be a major argument in its favor.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Allison, certainly not least, but last to add your perspective on baseball, which I also find fascinating. So please tell us more about your work.
Of course. Those of you who heard me present, I often say this. Now we're going to take a sharp right turn to completely different subject matters, because I don't always do things traditionally. In fact, I rarely do things traditionally. I am a communications scholar, I would say. Primarily, I focus in fandom studies, and I was raised by economists. My mother was one of the prominent gender studies economists. So I've always had that sort of break the rules tradition behind me. You know, my mother was one of the first PhDs at her school, all of that. So I was always raised from this perspective of, you know, rules don't really matter and just research what you want to research. And so that's where I've always come from. And so I've sort of put this together a little bit like that. I start from the perspective that literally everything can be a research question. And if I find it interesting and I keep thinking about it, I'm going to research it. I don't really care what field it's in. I don't care where somebody would pigeonhole it. If it's interesting to me and I have the techniques and the ability to research it, I'm going to research it, which is why some of you who've heard me speak at different conferences, I can go from one far end of the spectrum to the other end in 1 year, because I often think of what's interesting. So some examples is 1 year I was at a lot of Cardinal games, go to a lot of Cardinal games, and the players' walk-up music got stuck in my head. And I was singing people's songs and I had no idea what I was singing, but I'm singing along to them. And I thought, that's really interesting. So I built this huge database of every player's walk-up music that they used over the entire season and started analyzing different factors of it. You know, did players from certain countries use different types of music, you know, just different genres? What were the most popular genres? You know, did it go by, you know, where they lived in the country? It was just one of those things where it was just the passion project. I was like, if I'm sitting in the stadium singing along to music and noticing the differences between what players are playing different music, somebody else is doing the same thing. And ever since that project, I still get people on Twitter and everywhere asking me, you know, sending me notes like, did you hear that so-and-so's walking up to this song? And that's like 6 years ago, but it's still in everybody's head. And it's something that's super fun. And every once in a while, I think, you know, I could do so much more with it now. But then I think, you know, I've sort of moved on to other things. And do I want to go backwards and build it? I do a lot of work in social media. I started off doing a lot of work analyzing Twitter and different ways that people interact on Twitter, a lot of content analysis, discourse analysis of how people are interacting on Twitter. Especially, I focused a lot on the World Series and how different teams and different players and different media outlets were covering the World Series. A couple years ago, I tried to figure out using some different coding systems, if you could understand what was happening in a baseball game solely by being on Twitter. So could you never turn on the TV, never open up your Gamecast or anything, and just keep Twitter up and be able to tell exactly what was going on in a World Series game? I found that it's a little hard. If you know a lot about baseball, you can kind of do it, but you probably want a second source. So I, you know, played around with that. This past year, I've been looking a lot more into TikTok, the new great thing, and have been trying to figure out what are effective strategies to reach young people on TikTok and other social medias, you know, what really works. So I kind of deviate to whatever is interesting to me. It tends to be in pop culture. I definitely have an affinity for social media and do a lot of work on social media. You know, the couple of things that I would say, you know, Roberta was talking about her resources and where she goes. I don't have a place to go usually. It's deciding a time period and pulling stuff off of Twitter or TikTok. If you decide to do something that's sort of in the vein that I do, The biggest thing I'd say, and I know this applies to every historian out there as well, but I think it happens a lot when you're doing this more non-traditional research, is don't be discouraged when it doesn't work at all. Because the number of times I have said, oh, I'm going to pull all of these tweets, or I'm going to pull all of these TikToks, and it's going to be this great story of how, you know, this has improved over the course of the year, or how fandom or whatever, and I've seen nothing. You know, I spend 5 hours pulling data and it's nothing. I, at one point, and some of you may have heard this, did an entire presentation that had a great title, and the entire 20-minute presentation was, here's everything that can go wrong in a research project and what I learned from it, because it was a failure. But you have to accept those failures and learn from them and know that, you know, there's a path forward. And I don't have the library to go back to or the archives to go back to. So for me, it's learning, what can I do going forward? You know, was my question too narrow? Did I look at the wrong media? Should I have looked at Instagram instead of TikTok? What can I do in that way? You know, the other thing about being in sort of the field that I've put myself into is there's a lot of self-learning, and that's true of every field and every, you know, background that we all are in, the way we research. I've taught myself how to code. So I taught myself how to use R and code because I wanted to be able to do things with Twitter and do things with different systems, you know, production systems, stuff like that. So I taught myself how to code. You know, it was one of those things where I needed to improve my skills. I needed to learn more, and I figured out what people were doing, and I taught myself. You know, it's definitely a situation where I often am asking others for help. And we should not be scared as researchers to ask for help, to ask for others to do that. I have a group of people who, for my personal style of research, I come up with a crazy topic, and I literally have a group of people who I say, this is what I think I want to research next. Does this make any sense to anybody? And if I get some nods of like, yeah, that makes sense. And I'm like, okay, I've got a topic. If everybody's looking at me like I'm crazy and I'm the only one who understands what I want to do, then I'm like, maybe this is just one of those things that should stay in my head for a while, and it might come out later making sense, but it doesn't make sense yet. You know, I've been thinking over the last 2 days a little bit about, you know, women in sports and where I would maybe go. And these aren't topics. These are topics for any of you to take. Just throwing some stuff out there just to give some ideas of, you know, what's been going through my head. I think that there's a lot of stuff from last night when we had the discussion with Kat about League of Their Own. And I was thinking a lot about discourse analysis or rhetorical analysis, looking at the movie versus the TV show, or looking at images and themes in the TV show, looking at how the fandom has reacted to the TV show. You know, you can go on Twitter or something and look at the hashtags for League of Their Own TV show, or search for it and see how the different fandoms were reacting, see how the different, you know, comment sections were. I mean, Kat was telling us her story yesterday about the people who approached her, you know, in the Starbucks. And I think that there's so much interesting stuff that could be there. You know, any sort of women's sports movie, there's always an interesting discourse that we have, even just in the imagery that they use in the movies. How do they show women, you know, as fans? How do they show women interacting? You know, Roberta was talking about, we always get quizzed. You know, the TV shows are just as guilty a lot of times of how they show women, how they dress women. I always tell my students, it seems like, you know, women and men in television shows are dressed for 2 completely different seasons. You know, the men are dressed for winter and the women are dressed for summer, but yet they're in the same scene together. So you can always sort of draw analysis from that. The other thing that's been running through my mind is we've been talking is, you know, be very interesting to look at women journalists or women, you know, influencers on TikTok, especially the sports ones, and look at their comment section compared to some of the big men's comment sections. You know, pick some just influential baseball journalists, men and women, and go through their comment sections. I would imagine they are dramatically different, and there'd be a lot of good content there of how people interact with each other. So that, you know, those are things that are running through my head, and I encourage everybody, you know, to always think about what you're seeing and how you're viewing it, and see if it's a research project, see if it's something you can research. And I'm always here to help. If you do decide to do something on Twitter or TikTok or Instagram and get overwhelmed, you can always reach out to me. I've done a lot of work in this area by now.
Thank you very much for that, Allison. Yeah, I read your article about what'll the baseball experience be in 2040, and all the stuff about the, virtual reality and all of that. Still at the heart of it was the experience of the game and how to capture that if you're not actually there. And I think that literally gets to the heart of the game, which is that it's something we share, and we share with other people we love, physically, just mentally. We were texting yesterday every time Pujols came up to bat, right? I mean, there's a community, and you reach it however you can. So thank you for all that. We do have a couple questions and some really good comments in the chat. There's been lots of chat during our panel, which I'm really excited about. And I wanted to point out a couple comments people raised. One would be, it'd be interesting to compare the current advertising and its support or lack thereof in general with women's sports. And just kind of look at that in a bigger picture. And so I think that's a good point, and throw that out there for Roberta or whoever wants to do that research. Also, somebody commented that genealogybank.com was a place that they found useful doing research on the AAG PBL. That there's Rockford papers in there and newspapers from some of the other team cities. So that's good for everybody to know. If you haven't been looking at the chat, I encourage you. There's lots of stuff going on in there. Also, a question about the walk-up music. First, is that database available?
I have it. I'm a little reluctant to share it. Saying this tactfully, because I know what's going on the internet. The way we decided to scrape the web to put together this database is not something that is entirely favored by a lot out there. So I don't really like sharing it, but if somebody is interested, I can send them the spreadsheet that is the database.
Okay, that'd be great. Yes, good idea. And then a follow-up on that. Why was Edwin Diaz's walk-up music, Narco by Tommy Trumpet and Blaster Jacks, why has that become so popular this year, several years after it was first used as walk-up music? Is it just because the Mets are playing so well? Which I'm sure Leslie will want to weigh in on.
I think that there is a fair amount about the team needing to win for something to catch on, the fandom really getting, incited about the team and that coming out. I do also think that there has been over the last year, I think in this sort of, I'm going to use this lightly, post-COVID time period that we're in, at least in baseball, the show of the closer has returned. We used to have Mariano Rivera, Trevor Hoffman, and it was a show when they came out in the field. This year, that show has returned, and almost every team has started to put on a light show or Tommy Trumpet or something, and it's become the show again. And I've done work on bullpen carts, and that used to be the show, is them coming out in the bullpen cart. I think that we're seeing that because of what the fandom is asking for. And also, I think there is some incentive for teams to do interesting things in the later innings because the games have been criticized by some as being too long, having that show later on is something that encourages people to stay. I know I've been at a lot of Cardinal games since Ryan Helsley started having his Hells Bells. They turn off all the lights and red flashing everywhere, and it says Hells on the screen for Helsley. And then he comes out in the pitch dark to Hells Bells, and you start having that. And I think that people, I hear kids and stuff talk about it, and they want to stay to see that. And I think there's a big marketing strategy behind it. That was a long answer to a maybe easier question, but.
There was also a question about how you taught yourself to do R.
I did it several ways. I started off by, there's a really good free online book that's R for data scientists, and it walks through some of the basics. And then I wanted to start with textual analysis. And so I searched for a book, and there's again, a really good book that's like textual analysis for R. And so I started that way. R is amazing because it's free and there's all these free resources. And I saw somebody mention in chat too, R is, once you get the basic skills down for R, you can Google almost anything. There's something called Baseball R, which is just a community where people study baseball. And I found the R community to be extremely friendly. So when I was starting off, I was on the R for Data Science Discord, and I would ask what were probably ridiculous questions, and people would jump in and look at my code and help correct it. And I just got better over time. There's also something called Tidy Tuesday, which they put out some code every Tuesday, and you play with it. It's not baseball related, but you play with it, and everybody posts their results, and you don't have to, but people post the results. And I started off by just copying people and seeing if I could replicate what they did. And then as I got better, I did it myself. So, you know, there's a lot of different ways. YouTube is great. It's not as difficult as it sounds to teach yourself how to use R.
Thank you for that. I'm looking to see if we have some other questions. Let's see. What about MLB Network, where the men dress business pro and the women look like they're ready to go night clubbing?
Exactly. That's the seasonal thing. I always tell my students when we do content analysis and discourse analysis in my methods class, the example I always use is you look at almost anything, and men and women look like they're going to two different places, or they're in two different climates. And it's the way we view, I guess, the way society views women right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I've rarely seen a woman sports commentator who didn't have long hair.
Mm-hmm.
Long hair and cleavage seem to be an absolute necessity, even for the best commentators. They've got to have that long hair and that cleavage, maybe a tan if they're white.
Mm-hmm.
Way too much makeup. Yeah, the high heels. And it really is an issue, I think. And forget the fact that they're all conventionally attractive.
Not so for the men.
No, they are definitely not all conventionally.
And not so for the male announcers being particularly great at the job. I had a conversation with my husband trying to understand the end of a recent baseball game that went into extra innings with a throw from the third baseman that hit the runner on his way home, and what was the consequence of that. And they had a big explanation on MLB Tonight or whatever show it was. And I listened to it and I was more confused than when they started explaining it. So, isn't that a requirement for the job to be able to explain stuff to people? But maybe not. I don't know. So, well, I think we're at our time limit. I don't know if I haven't seen any other questions in the chat. So if I missed one, please speak up now. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it back over to our operator, Leslie, and she will sign us all out for the day. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was a really fascinating session. Once again, I don't know, I've been sitting here taking notes the whole time, all 3 days, and thinking about all of this research opportunities and things. I just want to say real quick, so thank you all for today. Thank you to our panelists, our moderators, our hosts, our presenters, and for the 3 days. You will notice I tried to put it in the chat as early as I heard. We're going to reschedule our book group because Andrea Williams is ill and really wants to be with us. So stay tuned for announcements. We'll send that out. But I just want to, as we are finishing up, I'm going to do that, Marlene, if people want to stick around. I don't know if Laura was able to get it working or not, but if not, she said no. Okay. So we'll work on trying to send that link out so people can see it and watch it on your own. I was able to pull it up on my computer from the link you sent me, Laura, so I can just send that out to everybody if you're cool with that. Okay. But I just wanted to once again say a quick thank you to our committee that worked so hard to organize this conference. That's Kat and Marlene and Catherine and Kathy and Mary and Jessica, and to the entire SABR staff, both Scotts, Jessica and Jacob. Really appreciate all the work that everybody has put in. And thank you to all of you who came and participated so incredibly. And when you get a chance to go back, which most of us are probably going to do, to watch the videos, to pay attention to reading in the chat, all the kinds of resources and things. And thanks, Kate, for all your work in capturing a lot of those and providing links to all of those various pieces, and to Lorene, who captured all of the book aspects. These are the kinds of things that help us move forward and continue to keep this dialogue going. And so we will be sending out a survey to everybody, asking for your feedback and for thoughts for future conferences as well. So please ask for your help in making sure that that is done as we move forward. And so, Kat, did you have any final words that you wanted to say, or are you good?
I just wanted to add my congratulations to you, Leslie, and to everyone who worked so hard to pull this conference together. It amazes me every single year. It just gets better. And the IWBC is very excited about the continued partnership with SABR and the ways in which we're going to make this conference grow. So thank you all for being here. And on behalf of the IWBC, thank you for your support of us. And we'll see you next year, if not before.
Yeah, and as the chair of the Women's Committee for SABR, I want to also say that this is a great partnership between the two, and encourage people to join both organizations and support everything that is happening. There's great synergy going on between SABR and the IWBC. So thanks, everybody. Certainly can stick around for a few moments if people want to chat, but otherwise enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and thank you so much for coming out and joining us for this great weekend.